and welcome to Tabletop 24. I'm Alan.
I'm John.
And I'm Brian.
And welcome to another episode of We'll Play Again, where we take a focus on games that we've played and look at getting them back to the table and how soon they're going to get back to the table. With time being precious and ever-growing collections, would we play again? Today we're looking at Scout from Oink Games. Scout has been a very widely engaged game with the hobby community. It is currently nominated and shortlisted for the Spiel des Jahres. With that, there is limited stock availability, and we believe that at UKGE it was the last stock in the world at that point, with reprints coming into Japan quite soon and worldwide restocks happening shortly. So I do believe a few retailers have still got their hands on a couple of copies. We were very lucky to be able to get this. I think it was our first stop on the Friday of UKGE, and in fact I picked up a copy and John's also got a copy, so we were very fortunate to pick that up. And Brian's just sat here and went, well, what happens if I want to get a copy? So that might be a little bit foreboding onto what's happening at the end of this, and when we get to our sort of would we play it again at the end, but that's there. So what is Scout? Scout is a hand shedding trick taking style game where you will be dealt a hand of cards which will have a number at the top and a number at the bottom. Your first decision is going to be which way round you want that hand. And sometimes the hand will be upside down or the right way up, depending on which way you look at it. And you cannot change the order of the cards. Once they're dealt to you, that is fixed.
And I've just sat here all the way through your introduction, shuffling mine, which is a big no-no. Yeah.
So John's obviously fidgeting on this one. But it is a case of you stuck with your cards there, and there is a reason why John was shuffling, because we were trying to prove a point just before this video. But anyway, you do have the top and the bottom. You will be choosing which is going to be better for you, and you will be playing a show, which is essentially the trick, out of your hand in order to beat the current show. And it will be a case of number of cards beats anything, then of a kind beats anything of the same number of cards, and then a run will beat those, and then high cards win. So a run of 3, 4, 5 is beaten by a run of 4, 5, 6. So that's essentially the game. You can also scout. So once a trick's been played and you can't beat it, you can take a card off of one that's already been played and essentially giving the person who run that show a point. So it's quite a few ways of getting points. But then there's a few ways of getting negative points. So the winner of the round just receives the points that they've got, but everybody else that didn't win the round receives negative points for the cards that are left in their hand, which a few of us got punished on the games that we've just recently played. Yeah. But other than that, it's fairly quick to set up. It's an Oink Games. It comes in a very small form factor box. There's a lot of tokens in there as well. I have sleeved my cards, and I can still get the game in the box snugly, but I have had to take the foreign rules out of the box to enable that.
Fit it in,
yeah.
So I like the game. It's very small table size. It's basically hand size, somewhere to put the tokens and somewhere to lay them out. So it's a really nice, if you've just got a small table or taking it away camping or sort of playing on a train, maybe you can play it there. And it's really nice from that point of view. It doesn't take a lot of table space at all. The theme is circus based. So the idea is you're putting on a show in the circus, and actually the cards have got names on of acrobats, like Gloria, for example. And Gloria can do stilts on this side, or she can do singing on this side. We found we didn't really use that. I think when you're playing the game, you're just looking at the numbers on the cards. Odds are 1 or 2. I've got to beat a 1 or 2 with something else. If you were interested in doing so, you could say things like, oh, I've got here Brian the Clown. I'm going to play Brian the Clown. That's my show. And someone says, to beat Brian the Clown, I'm going to send in Jennifer and Stephen on bicycles. So you could play the game, and maybe for younger players, that would be something that they could find enjoyable. What I would say about that is the icons and the names aren't very big. So if that was going to be something you want to do, I'd prefer to see those in sort of bigger, friendlier font, maybe.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, you're looking at your hand very much like this, and so you might get the symbols in, you're not necessarily going to get the names in, and like you say, when you're actually playing the game, you're particularly on a lower player count, so on a 3-player, that's when you've got the most cards in your hand, and you're not really going to be able to look at the names until you're getting into a much smaller hand. I think.
Yeah.
So
it's almost like you've picked your cards you're going to play, and then you're reading out what it actually is. But it's just a bit of flavour. It's not really needed for the game. And you kind of think it's there if you want it, really.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice, what I would describe as a limited deck game, in that you couldn't play it with a normal deck of cards, because of the fact that the numbers are different on both sides.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that Bryan the Clown is actually a card. I thought you were joking for a minute. There you go. It's very. This is a game that anybody can pick up and play. It's so inclusive. Your aunt, your gran, any family member could play. Children from 10 up. I know I played this with Hannah, and my wife have played this. It's so easy to pick up and learn and play, and it's a great little game that's not just a gateway into the hobby, but anybody can pick it up, and it just goes a long way. It's five. You could play 5 or 6 games of this in an hour quite easily. Yeah. And for saying that, that's something that it won't out. I don't think it stay at 6 games in an hour at all.
No.
It's just one that you'd like to keep playing. It's very Moorish. It's very, oh yeah, I could do that better next time. And the amount of times I played this and gone, I should have done my scout and show at the same time, when it would have improved my hand. Yeah, it's a cracking game. Really, really nice. The theme, you can almost, when you're scouting, you can say, I'm scouting Bryan the Clown, and put it in your hand, and do it that way around. But yeah, I like this. I
like that it's a small box. Obviously, Oink Games are all small box games, but you can just pop this in your bag, really, take it on a journey with you. Yeah. And like I said, if this was in my collection, it probably wouldn't be in my game room. It would be in my front room. Just play it of an evening, really.
Yeah, and to hit John's point of inclusivity, there is just numbers and learning what the numbers do. Yeah. You've not got a massive rule set behind it, and you could slim it back so that there's not as much harsh, because it is quite a harsh game. It can be very punishing if you're playing. I mean, we've played a couple of games before recording this, and actually you could be quite punishing with the way you play, and there's a bit of meanness in how you play, by whether you're going to end the game early with people with lots of cards in their hand, or whether you're
playing out or finish it quick.
Yeah, you could force people to be holding plenty of cards in their hand, but I don't think that's a negative. That's just the nature of the game.
Yeah. No, and I think that is, it's not to say that it's not negative. I think it's the fact that you could play this with younger people, or potentially people that are outside
or season gamers.
Yeah, and you could pick that up with them, and you could bring them in, and you might want to be a bit more casual with your play, but you could also play this at a very competitive level and very sort of take that itch. So the game's structured in a way that you play the number of rounds of the number of players. That's the official rules. Anyway, you can keep going as long as you like. And we've said you can get positive, you can also get negative points as well. And you could play multiple hands. A 2-player game plays over 2 rounds, a 3-player game 3, and so on.
So John's played a 2-player game.
It's a different beast to this, because you've got a limited amount of scouting that you can do. You basically 3 scouts that you can do. So it changes up the game from 3 players, because with 3 players, there's that variation of different hands coming out for scouting, rather than just what the other person's got out.
I think maybe a 5-player game we haven't played yet would be different again, because quite often, if you're the last person to do a show that comes back to you without anyone putting on a show, the game round ends. But I think in a 5-player game, that would be less likely to happen.
Yeah, because you potentially play a show, and by the time it comes around to the 4th or the 5th player, 3 cards have potentially been taken out of that show.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see that at the higher player count, and I think we're going to try and get that, but with playtime being limited at the minute, it's been a bit difficult to get to the higher play count. But I think it does play a very different game, and I think the 2-player game plays very strategic.
It is.
Because there's been a few times I've put cards down, I know that I'm picking back up again, and I've put them down out of one space in my hand to put them into another space in my hand.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And you know for a fact, if you put a run of 3 and the other player can't beat it, then they're going to scout one of those, and you can take the middle card. So there's a lot of strategy in that 2-player game. And over the course of a couple of rounds, you can mitigate negative points and sort of push forward and bring that round. But the one real big negative for me is there is luck in this, and the luck is, right, this is my hand, and that's what I've got to deal with. I have an option to flip it, and I'm fairly sure there'd been a lot of play testing to show that there is no such thing as a truly bad hand. But if you get with three rounds for us, 3 bad hands, that could ruin your game. Now, on the flip side of that is the speed at which it plays, that I think is enough that rounds with poor hands are quite quickly forgotten. But also, you can craft out of it. So, ignore the 2 9s and the 2 8s I've got there, which are actually quite good. And a lot of the other cards which are quite good in this hand. So, for instance, here, let's say I've got this 4 and this 6, and somebody pops down something.
You got the 2 and the 4 as well, so you could take a 3.
Yeah, so my options there is I can actually take a 3. I'm going to scout this 9, which I'm able to flip and put in there. So you're actually crafting your hand. That now gives me a much stronger 3, which I could play to beat those 2 8s. So there's a lot of crafting you can do, and I think a very good player at this, and coming back to the competitive side of this, a very good player could craft their way out of a poor hand quite easily.
The luck is not what you're dealt with, it's what people are putting down. It's what, if you don't get the numbers that you need when they're coming up here, I think that's just as much an element of luck as what you were dealt with.
Yeah.
And sometimes can be a bit more harsh.
Yeah, and also I found that, if there's a choice of taking one card out, scouting a card, the player before you might hit the one card that you wanted as well. So, so there's a bit of luck in there as well.
Yeah. But I think there's enough element of crafting that it does outweigh, but it must be said there is that little bit of luck. And you can't feel hard done by on 1 hand out of 3 in a game, and potentially 1 hand out of 9 if you're playing 3 games back to back. So you've got to take that. And also vice versa, you could end up with, let's say I ended up with that in my hand, and if I was able to, let's just make something work, if I was able to go, right, okay, I'm going to play an 8 to beat that 7, I get that point, I've then improved my hand. It's another way of crafting. So I think there's a lot of strategy when you get a bit deeper into this game. But I think if you was taking it very much on the surface, and again, coming back to those people that are not used to playing card games or used to playing hobby games, I think on the surface they might just go, oh, well, I've got a poor hand, I can't do anything. But after a few hands, I think they'd learn what they can and can't do. So I think the crafting is really strong, and the strategy you can apply to that is really strong.
Yeah, it's a game with a lot of depth. That it's not like it's Rummy plus. Yeah. It's not. If you can play Rummy, you can play this, and this is the more strategic version of a strategic version of Rummy, which I think I would be prepared to play. Rummy's a great game. This is a great game. I think the luck and skill balances itself out quite nicely. I think you depend. There's my hand. There's enough in there for me to work with.
Well, you can work with some of it.
You can work with some of it.
And over the course of 3 or 4 shows, yes, you could end up with an absolute ridiculous draw, and you could end up with just by chance 6 cards in a run. Okay, you play those 6 cards in a 3-player game. The chances of somebody being able to beat 6 or 5 cards is very slim on their first opening hand.
But the thing is, you're not going to sit there and then craft the 6-card run just to block everybody out.
No. But if it was what you was dealt to start with, it could cause a problem. But I think the strategy on the long game, the 3 rounds, it all mitigates itself, I think. Yeah. At that point.
It's a very finely balanced game, I feel. Very finely balanced game.
Yeah. So with that all said then, John, would you play again?
Certainly would. And if it's one of those, if you've got 3 people sitting waiting for a 4th at a game, like you could sit and crack out a couple of rounds of this before they arrive, and it might be, I'll play that, and he goes to a 4-player game and a couple more rounds. It's one that, like it's been said, it'll sit on your shelf and come out whenever you can. I think I'd play again. No problem at all.
I'd play again now. I really like it. It's got a lot going for it, as we talked about, and I think there's a lot more to learn in it. I'd like to play with different player counts as well. I think that would really change it.
Yeah, for me, it's we'll play again soon. Now, the caveat on that soon is it's probably going to be in my game bag when I go to game nights and game events, because it's such a quick and such an easy teach, such a nice little game that it's probably going to see the table quicker than some of those we'll play again now games for me. But it's not going to be the draw to me. I've played 10 games of this now. I think I've experienced what Scout has to offer. I think there's a lot more about the people that's around the table, and yes, I'd like to play at the higher player counts, but it's not going to be my main game that I bring to a game.
No, it's a fill with a capital F, in that it could easily take over a night, but it's one that I've got Scout, right?
Yeah, and let's say you've got a 3-hour game night, which is quite common for the hobby. You might bring 2 hour and a half games, and you'll bring this as a palate cleanse in between. You could quite easily see yourself not getting to that second game because you carry on playing hands of this. Yeah. Not because it overruns, but just because you're like, oh, let's go again. Yeah, let's go again. I had to stop these two from playing it to actually record this video. So that's how they feel about it. But that's Scout. That's our views on that. Yeah. If you haven't done so already, check out other videos on the channel. Take care, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.